Claudia Aparicio, co-founder of GrowthX and managing partner of Singularity University in Bogota, Colombia. Very much welcome to you, Claudia, and please take it over.
Thank you, Patricia, for having me here. I'm very honored to be at this panel, and I'm very inspired by the previous intervention. In my case, I want to talk to you about what it means to promote disruptive visions such as Singularity University has in a context of an emerging economy such as Colombia is and Latin America. So in these 10 minutes, I hope I will provoke reflections about three main topics: the importance of narrative in circumstances such as this. Secondly, the reality of the future of work versus the future forecasting on which we have been working before. And third, and lastly, the case of Colombia regarding the COVID crisis. So I decided to start talking about narrative because before the coronavirus, all discussions about the future of work were somewhat rhetorical. There was a kind of cliché in which we always said or talk about professions that did not exist yet, and there was always a question about how quick these changes will take place, especially in developing countries where there has been a mentality of late adoption phase of technological advances. And the truth is that technologies were already there, but we have a false sense of security when thinking that it was an option decision to use them or not. The most paradoxical thing about this situation is that although many experts agree on the idea that next revolution in the near future will be biotech, we never figure out that it will be a virus with exponential growth rates that will accelerate technological transformations as life or death question. So Nikita, please next slide. And today we are facing a change in narrative. And for me, this is the most important thing, the most essential thing, because as Harari says in Homo Deus, we are a species of storytellers. So the future of work will be, in my opinion, the one we want to build. To give you an example related with social services sector, think about the discussion about the need to promote equity and fight against poverty as a topic. Even if it is something that we're talking about since I was born, it is true that in a liberal and capitalist model that appreciate work as the center of society, it did not make a career. But today we are seeing a 360-degree change in the narrative because public health and general interest circumstances are at the center of the discussion of economy recovery. So if the existence of people on streets seeking informal income increases the risk of contagion, if housing conditions are essential to eliminate the cost of healthcare to the maximum, then it's worth to implement measures that privilege health and protect formal jobs. Isn't it's amazing? And because it seems to me that finally we did it, we succeed. And this is because we are facing this change of narrative. Few months ago, next slide, please, automation was the #1 enemy of unions and employees in industries such as transportation and manufacturing, for example. And next slides, please. And universal basic income pilots were focused on measuring whether they could effectively increase social mobility. But today, as we will see in the next slide, the narrative has changed because machines has demonstrated that it can save life. Machines can save entire industries that are at risk of shortage if their employees fail ill, as is the case of the pork processing plant at Iowa, and universal basic income solutions are outlined as the most efficient public health and social peace policies for circumstances like the one we are experiencing right now. So remember, the future will be the one we want to create. And so moving forward to our second topic that I will show you in the next slide, we will show a comparison. I work on building this comparison between what we thought the future of employment will be and the reality, because I'm seeing some very interesting revelations that we shall consider. Before the pandemic, many consulting firms, for example, Accenture, estimate that in the next 5 years, 1 out of every 7 hours of work will be capable of being automated. But in practice, it has happened from one day to another, which means that after the COVID, there will be people who probably won't be able to access at any type of employment ever again. And it has huge implications as well in the educations, because as you know, education and works are always tied. And because before we were talking about, and Christine mentioned that we were talking about skilling and reskilling training process in order to help people to transit from the past to the future. But right now, there's no time for it. Organizations that want to survive need to learn in real time. And it is producing a huge pressure in education industry, because startups in edtech industries were not at the top of priorities for investors. But right now, universities have become direct competitors with edtech players and are under enormous pressure to reduce their costs, while disruptive education models are rapidly advancing into peer-to-peer learning strategies and subscription business model. So it is incredible that the investment in online education will reach 350 or 400 billions in the next 5 years, according to the Peter Diamandis forecasting. So this area of education, and for you who works with youth people, it is super important, and this is changing so fast at the level that, in my opinion, are putting at risk the conventional model of education. Other thing that I want to mention, it's automation, because while in logistic areas, automation seems to be the best option, and this is something that we predict well, I found very interesting to see how small players that are the front face of having contact with customs are making innovations thanks to their knowledge of customers. So they are basically converting all their employees in salespeople based in real customer-centric approach. And it is a vision that exceeds Amazon styles, data analytics. And this will be maybe allow them to pivot many jobs that are not necessarily high qualified to mediate empathy relations in commercial areas, which is something amazing for me. For me, it's a real discovery. Another topic that I want, that was not foreseen in the calculation of the future of work, is the low-touch economy that is generating a significant challenge in industries such as retail or restaurants. That's why many people are thinking as those industries as a service, which is pretty challenging. And this is something that we didn't see. And lastly, last topic that I would like to point it out is the concept of 21st century skills. Mike and Christine talk about it. And I think it's very important, because before the crisis, we were we were talking all the time about STEM skills that are very valuable per definition, because of course we need it, but it seems right now in this decentralized work environment that we are creating, there is a need to have entrepreneurs everywhere, and that require employees with collaboration, self-learning, and autonomy skills that are much higher than estimated. And lastly, the last thing that I want to mention is that idea of changing our mindset from a global perspective to a self-sufficiency and micro-communities perspective, because we were thinking that we can have whatever we want, but right now in that crisis, it seems we are recovering the sense of a community, and this is a role that it seems to me very important for a movement like us, such as a YMCA. And lastly, please, Mikita, show us the next slide. I want to share with you the case of Colombia, because it's been very, very, very interesting until now. And just to give you an idea about what we are facing right now, next slide, please. Since April 13, we adopt a lockdown in the country. Then the economy stopped completely. So compared with the US, the cases are very low, only 260 people for every million of inhabitants. However, we have not reached the peak of infections, and the social pressure to return to normality is very high. Because 20% of the population in Colombia, it's informal. We have around 13 million people under the line of poverty. So this social pressure put at risk the success of the epidemiological measures taken to date. And the paradox that I want to mention right now is just 1,000 corporations in Colombia produce 80% of the GDP of the country. So you wonder why we need to allow these people to get into the street to work, while 1,000 companies can produce 80% of the GDP. So next slide, please. So having in account this situation, as it was mentioned previously, the government prioritized social aids at the same level of public health. And in just 2 months, the number of beneficiaries receiving social aid doubled through a temporary figure called solidarity income. And the permanent measure that had approved before the crisis that correspond to refund indirect taxes to the poorest people is also in place. So nowadays, the discussion about the creation of universal income is included in the development plan of Bogota, and at the national level as well, there's a huge discussion. My reflection on this regard for you, who are social players, it's to rethink the models of intervention in communities that will be governed essentially by data. I think we have advanced in 2 months more than in 20 years of social policies in my country. And it is not only because the rapid allocation of funds, but also of essential components for social mobility, such as digital literacy or bank access, because all these people is doing that through their mobile phones mostly, and it is incredible the amount of people that are getting access to bank accounts right now. And the more and more the operational side, I think in my opinion, the operational side of social services will be eventually automated. So it's time for you as a movement to redefine your role on this new scenario. Remember, the future will be the one you want to build. So it was trying to get fast and to explain all these topics, and I'm open to discuss about it. Thank you very much.
Can you tell us too what you are doing to protect your spirit, mind, and body during these times?
I've been very busy. I suppose it's happening with all of you, all people that are very engaged with social activists are deploying many initiatives. So I'm finding my inspiration in purpose, and I've been making part of many initiatives. In Colombia, we have Colombia Cuida Colombia, which is a big partnership between many organizations trying to recreate this narrative and bring an optimistic point of view to people. We're also working on a ventilator initiative from Colombia, Mexico, and the US. So there's many things happening around, and that's why I'm so motivated at this moment and taking care of myself through those initiatives.
First question is from Lee Danes, and it's for Claudia. Claudia, excluded groups of young people, including migrant and LGBTQ young people and young women, will see their job prospects most damaged by COVID-19. How can they secure decent work post-coronavirus and given the rapidly changing future of work?
As I mentioned before, I think there's many people that won't find a job at all after the COVID. So that's why it's so important to think about other additional social aids, such as universal basic income. And also, I think we are redefining our priorities as a society. So before COVID, work was at the center of society. And I think it's not longer going to be the center of our life. So even if someone cannot find a job, they can find a purpose. And this is my hope. I think in the next generation, we need to work hard to make situations such as this doesn't happen again. But unfortunately, for a generation which is in the middle of this transition, it will be tough.
Claudia, considering that the future of learning and working is becoming more virtual, how do you see it will change or is changing the future of services that focus on in-person connections, such as the ones that the YMCA fosters through gyms, summer camps, and youth leadership groups, among many others?
I think there's a lot of huge challenge in that area, but I think they are very, very important. And right now, my idea is during the lockdown, we are taking care of us in our homes, but later neighborhood will be the center of our life. So we need to control these communities. And if we keep control those communities and the epidemic in those areas, we maybe can start to have the usual activities you drive through the YMCA movement. And it will be amazing because I think in the modern life, we forgot the idea of neighbors and support that we can bring to each other's. So right now there's a society that is divided in silos. So depending the school you attend, you move there, people move to their work. And right now we're focusing on these small areas that we can control. So what about those ideas about communities? How can we leverage the power of a micro community, such as a neighborhood? So that's what I think is the most valuable support that you can bring to your communities, especially because you're talking about young people. And in my opinion, the situation with young people, it's very, very confused. We're not thinking enough about them because we are taking care of our health. So the easy way to control the situation is to say, young people, stay at home, study at home. and it has an enormous impact in their social and emotional development. So I think the YMCA community can help to restart this sense of give them a kind of support or emotional aid, and it's feasible. But we need to keep in mind that it will be hard to work with a large amount of communities. We need to be focused on small communities.